Chaffee Crossing, that new neighborhood on the southeast side of Fort Smith, is growing.
The potential explosion of growth that could happen in Chaffee Crossing.
We're going to talk about things that may be happening out at Chaffee.
We're seeing growth happen that we've never seen before.
You know the growth that's going on at Chaffee Crossing.
But is all growth good growth?
I-49 going up to tie into 40 is coming.
And for Fort Smith to be prosperous, we need to be able to house all the folks that's coming here. And there's a lot of risk.
Do we have enough water and sewer to provide out there for the next 5 years?
In my opinion, no.
This is part 3 in a series of videos about widening Massard Road in Fort Smith, Arkansas. In parts 1 and 2, we talked about traditional development patterns and traffic congestion, and here in part 3, we'll talk about how roadways may or may not generate wealth, and how widening Massard will lose money for the city of Fort Smith. We think of roadways like Pokémon. They start off at level 1, they train, get stronger, and eventually, they evolve. But can we make Massard Road stronger as a Pikachu without evolving it into a Raichu?
I thought Pikachu wants to evolve.
No way. My Pikachu has always wanted to get stronger as a Pikachu.
We'll get back to Pokémon after we talk a little bit about water slides first.
Are the 5 water slides, and now there's a chance to double the number of water slides, which is what many of the bigger kids like best. Now the Fort Smith City Administrator says there's an offer to buy 5 new water slides at a 40% discount and expand the park.
The way we think about whether or not to build a water slide is the same thought process that we should use when we decide to build roadways.
Item number 2 provides for the expansion of Parrot Island Water Park.
So I know we've had days where we have hit max attendance. Will we be able to increase attendance with this?
So the issue right now is that, like I said, there's multiple days we hit capacity and too busy for people to enjoy it. So with this expansion, it would move east of the park and add more seating, more shade.
When I looked at the financials, it looks like admissions are up by about 23%, but revenue's not following.
Expansion, capacity, financials, growth, revenue. Why is it that when we're talking about $4.2 million for a water slide, all of those words make perfect sense? But when we talk about spending 3 times that much on a roadway, I only hear a fraction of those words being used. So let's use some of those words for Massard Road. We're widening Massard because someone drew it that way on a map sometime in the past, and as we all know, cartographic documents are always above reproach and can never be questioned.
Okay. Obviously this blue part here is the land.
And then when it comes time to build the roadway, someone comes up with a dollar amount and the engineers build it to scope.
Money, please!
But some of us like to think about these projects critically.
I know we'd like to accommodate new enclaves. That's 637 acres. 45 non-residential, 41 residential. That's also more streets. So the city needs to consider how we're going to continue to upkeep our roads. We're adding new roads. We're also going to have 1,500 families coming in with the Air Force.
It is common for some roadway projects, at least in other cities and states, to have to justify themselves through an economic impact analysis or a cost-benefit analysis. These types of studies essentially add up all the good things the roadway will bring, assign them a dollar value, and weigh those positive benefits versus the cost of the project and any potential negatives. In practice, the way these usually work is someone usually comes up with a dollar amount that they're willing to spend, and the study ends up concluding that that's exactly how much we need to fix traffic.
Money, please! Money, please!
But for giggles, let's do one for the Massard widening and see if we can build a good justification for or against widening the roadway. The 2 big ways to measure this are the value of time saved and economic growth. Time savings means we measure travel times before the expansion project, compare them to estimated travel times after the project, and assign a dollar value to each trip and the amount of time saved. Massard scores a 0 here because the average travel speed on Massard, and you can measure this yourself, is already faster than the posted speed limit, so the time savings for widening Massard is 0. Traffic is already traveling faster than the posted speed limit. Any time savings would be illegal. As an aside, it also highlights the absurdity of this widening project. If people are already traveling faster than the speed limit, why are we spending more money to help them speed even faster? There's also a lot of skepticism around the time savings method and whether we should use it at all.
In reality, what we've seen in more economically developed countries is that time has not been saved. Instead, people have used that increase in speed to travel further. Time is not saved, distance traveled increases.
I looked at the statistics for Fort Smith for a previous video, and I also confirmed what the skeptics are saying, that as we have increased roadway capacity, we haven't improved travel efficiency, we've just spread everything further out, increasing our long-term maintenance liability. Economic growth is the other advantage of roadways. This is the value of homes and businesses that get connected with that construction. These new homes and businesses provide tax revenue that we can measure, and we will measure them in a little bit, but first we should discuss how time savings and economic growth cannot coexist. They are two competing interests. Traffic engineers teach a concept of accessibility versus mobility. Accessibility is how many homes or businesses you have on the roadway, and mobility is how fast you travel. Accessibility is economic growth, and mobility is time savings. These are separate and opposite priorities, so traffic engineers think of every roadway as a negotiation between them. So the question is, what does the city want for Massard? Do we want a high-speed thoroughfare, or do we want economic productivity? You can't have both. When you try for both, we accomplish neither.
No new stroads. Period.
Rob is describing the Pokémon model of roadway design. A 2-lane connection route starts off small and fast and evolves into future forms, taking on new advantages and disadvantages. But there's a problem with that. Just like Ash Ketchum from Pokémon built his team around Pikachu being light and nimble, we designed Massard for having complex human activity. Accessibility. Accessibility just means human activity like a bike trail, a sidewalk, and driveways. We have driveways and access points that all create conflict points you might find on a highly accessible street, and we have a budgeted expansion project to increase mobility at the same time. This accessibility-mobility hybrid is called a stroad, and the traffic engineer who coined this term has this to say about them. Stroads squander community wealth. They are significantly more expensive to build than a street. For the level of investment, they have a comparably poor financial return and fail to provide a meaningful level of mobility. The benefits of decreased travel time directly contradict the benefits of increased economic growth. The two cannot coexist. Widening a roadway is an attempt to improve mobility, but if that mobility is justified to accommodate growth, it means that Massard will inevitably turn into a stroad. It will be a losing proposition. So let's do the math to prove it. As soon as a roadway is built or widened, a clock starts ticking for its resurfacing and eventually its reconstruction. Roads are like humans. Some don't last very long, some last a long time, but on average, our city's internal documents say we estimate roadways to last 40 years. That's a lot more than the standard 20 years, but we'll go with 40. That means from the day Massard Road is widened, it has 40 years to generate enough revenue to cover its maintenance cost. We're not factoring in inflation or tariffs or any other variables. We're giving this widening project the biggest benefit of the doubt possible. I'm not even 40 years old, and I've seen streets paved and reconstructed multiple times within my lifetime. Using a 40-year useful life for this calculation is more than generous and frankly overkill. Massard will also need to be resurfaced about halfway through that time frame as well, and to estimate the cost of a resurfacing, we can look at other resurfacing projects in Fort Smith, such as Williamsburg Road, which is being resurfaced in 2025 for this much money and this much length. If we applied this same rate to Massard, that comes out to about $1.46 million, which, if we add it to our initial construction and reconstruction costs, means the total cost of just the widened portion of this small section of Massard Road will be about $30 million. which also means the roadway will need to generate about $761,000 worth of economic productivity every year in order to pay for itself. You can say I'm not being fair because I'm counting the initial construction cost and the reconstruction cost together. You could argue that maybe the reconstruction cost should begin by being paid off by our grandchildren in the next generation, but that's a form of debt that I don't agree with because it pays for the construction not with the money that you have, but with the money that you hope to have in the future. And besides, here's all the other assumptions that I'm making that will mathematically favor the widening. Alright, so I can't promise to turn a spreadsheet into something that will keep you interested in the video. Civil engineers have a way of doing this math, but I'm not a civil engineer. I am a real estate accountant though, and I treated this a little bit like how a real estate developer in the private sector would determine whether a project pencils. First, we list our variables to solve. We can think of our gross leasable area as the service corridor that actually benefits from a widened Massard road. This is the new growth that we've been talking about this whole time. New residents, new builds, new money. When I make a map of the total service area of the widened portion of Massard Road, I determined it to be around 2.36 square miles. Feel free to fight back on my estimate here, but I'll caution you that all of these other roadways in the service corridor have maintenance costs too, and I'm pretending that not only are they free to maintain, but they're also developable and leasable land. For net operating income, I took the median household income of Fort Smith, and because Chaffee, this service area, is new and wealthier than average, I doubled it to about $101,805 per year per household. I also used this amount because it's the amount from this article I found on Investopedia, which reports that census data shows that households spend about $77,280 per year after taxes. And of that spending, things like housing, groceries, healthcare, and insurance aren't subject to sales tax, so the median family makes around $100,000 a year gross, but net on taxable goods per year is only $23,000. Now we don't know how many units we have yet, so we'll leave that one blank. And we'll say our NOI is 0.625% of $23,000, or $143.47 per unit per year. Our operating expenses, as we've already calculated, are $761,382.50 per year. And our number of units is simple as well. This is just our annual OPEX divided by our NOI. This is how many units we'll need in this area in order for this roadway expansion to pay for itself. When you do the math, that number is 5,307. Our last variable is capitalization rate, which is a measurement of return. Now, the city is a nonprofit corporation and doesn't have hungry investors insisting on a certain return, so for our purposes, we'll just say that if the capitalization rate is a positive number, the city makes money, and a negative number will lose the city money. So we'll leave the cap rate at 0%, but we can come back to this later when we have a little more data. So how do we fit 5,307 units in this section of town? With a population of 90,000 people living in 36,266 occupied housing units in Fort Smith, our population density is roughly 1,393 people per square mile in households of 2.48 people each. In order to accommodate a widened Massard, the population density in this part of town would need to quadruple to 5,577 people per mile squared. That's doable, but if we look at the land use map, in all likelihood, the population density in Chaffee will be slightly more dense than the rest of the city, but it's hard to estimate how much. If the Phase 3 widening corridor maintains the city's average population density, it would generate about 1,300 units That means the city will lose about $571,000 a year if we widen Massard and build out Chaffee with the same development patterns as the rest of the city. Of course, it won't happen that way because Chaffee is already more dense than the rest of the city. There's multiple apartment complexes, duplexes, townhomes, and single-family homes already built or under construction. In summary, the Phase 3 widening project does not pencil. I would be interested to see if someone else can make it work, but I think the Chaffee area still needs to thicken up a bit before its tax base can support a self-sufficient 5-lane roadway.
A thunderstone?
Yes, you can use it to make Pikachu evolve into a Raichu.
I could evolve Pikachu into a Raichu?
Different roadways drive the real estate market in different ways. Right now, Massard is thin and nimble and lean, and the homes and businesses alongside it are doing so because of that spryness.
If you make Pikachu evolve, Ash, you can't change it back.
Pikachu will never be the same.
I don't necessarily agree with the idea that roadways evolve like Pokémon, but neighborhoods do. And if we skip important steps in that process, if we evolve a neighborhood before it's ready, we miss out on all the amazing intermediary stages in the neighborhood's life. I'm talking about things like cafes, pocket parks, outdoor dining, playgrounds, boutique retail, independent grocers, quiet, tree-lined neighborhoods. These businesses do not exist along 4 or 5 lane stroads in any town. But they're the type of tax base a city needs in order to grow. We do ourselves a disservice to shut them out before we even test the market to see if this might be a good space for them to thrive. Let's build up a bit more before we overextend ourselves.
Do it, Pikachu! Agility now!
Raichu, use your body slam! Raichu evolved too fast, and it never learned the speed attacks it can only learn in the Pikachu stage.
I want Fort Smith to be the very best, like no town ever was. To plan it well is the real test.